and welcome to my video essay. I'll be discussing the poem called Australians in Action, and it's written by Banjo Patterson. This poem is very moving and passionate. It's also quite inspiring, and it is pretty troubled, being quite a sad poem. It's basically about remembering the war and how much sacrificing took place, and also death, and also quite a lot of fighting. It's quite an emotional poem, as it's just very deep and inspirational and all. There's quite a few techniques in this poem, such as rhyming, repetition and alliteration, emphasising the main points in the poem. And basically the theme is about war and sacrificing, also loss in families and loved ones. Now I'll be discussing the subject matter of the poem. It's really just about remembering the war, how and where it happened. I imagined that it was in Gallipoli. I also imagined that it was one of the soldiers written this poem, as it is in first person. It also shows that how real this poem can be, and it tells us about how shocking and terrifying it must have been for the soldiers. So basically, as I said, it is reminiscing the war. For example, in the first stanza, it says, "For honour of Australia." So this poem was directed at Australian soldiers. It also shows that they must have been very bold people, and to go through so much trauma to fight in the war. In the poem, it also mentions loved ones. For example, the sound of their women softly weeping. That just shows that those women must have been really lonely without them, and also just missing them heaps. I'll now be discussing the tone and mood of the poem. It comes across as a very negative and sad poem, making me quite depressed as I read it. And it also mentions how sometimes when they just gave up on everything, they just didn't want to be there and they just wanted to go home. For an example, the grey-clad figures with their dead, that line just makes it seem like they're kind of at a funeral, or the grey-clad figures is like a shadow over them. Maybe when they see someone get shot, one of their mates, or when they're looking at their many dead people, which would just make them depressed. In parts of the poem, it also mentions how proud they were to be an Australian soldier, and it has a sense of pride that they were chosen to go and fight, and that they can serve their country. It is also makes me feel sorry for them, as they did go through some harsh times. For an example, the Dead March, that part in the fifth stanza is capitalised, maybe meaning it's a song, so which is more things are dedicated to them, as they would have felt proud to be a soldier. The poet also uses quite a range of techniques, such as rhyming and alliteration. Some examples of rhyming are mother and another. This creates rhythm, giving it quite a slow pace, as this poem is quite negative. Also gives us quite a strength in certain words, such as see and we. It just emphasises those certain words, making us feel a range of emotions. The poet also uses alliteration in the poem. For an example, fighting through the fire and the flood. It gives us the effect of imagery, creating different things in our head, giving us certain emotions. It also makes that line more memorable, like I will remember that line, because it has good sense of alliteration. Techniques in this poem also stimulate the author's emotion and senses, giving it a feedback of depression and sadness. The purpose of this poem is informing the new generation about Australian soldiers and how great they were in the war, and also how difficult it was fighting then. It also mentions, for the theme, passing on the great legacy of being an Australian soldier, and how passionate they were to go over and fight. It also teaches the reader a lesson about how courageous they were, and it mentions a lot of relationships in the poem. For an example, and enrolled in the Brotherhood. So whilst they were in Gallipoli or wherever this poem is mentioned, they would have created good friendships which would get their mind off not being at home and help them get on being in the war by making these friendships. It also mentions there was never a prize so costly but we bought it. I think that line means like they weren't expecting anything when they got back home, but they did receive gifts when they got home, such as medals and plaques. And like in King's Park, how the fallen soldiers have trees named on them on the plaques. And they also received the prize of freedom. Australians in Action by Banjo Patterson is quite a depressing poem to read, making you feel sad and sorry for these soldiers. Also mentioning the loss, making you feel quite upset for the families and loved ones also. He does talk about the war and the families and the fighting whilst they were in war. It is quite a deep poem due to the alliteration and rhyming, creating emotion to the reader. It does mention the desire to have freedom and teaching us youth about the past and how great Australian soldiers were. Oh, it's on. I feel very sorrowful. It is, why do you keep shaking your head?
It's not a word.
Sorrowful. Sorrow. Giving me sorrow.
Emotional. Say emotional.
Oh, yeah, emotional. Can we crop that?
Yes.
Okay. It's also, yeah, we can crop that bit.
I told you to practice.
I did! This poem, very sad and depressed. Like, it's a very sad poem. Well, I'm not going to use it while Dad's there.
What? You're sad because you can't see yourself?
No, I'm sad because I forgot what to say.
We'll start again.
For an example, there was never a prize so prize. There was never a prize so costly.
Okay. Start from for an example.
For an example. Okay. For an example. Received the prize of freedom.
Play it again.
Prize of freedom. The prize of freedom.
Say it properly or I won't do this anymore. Do it. Hurry up.
Let me get out of me. Watch. Wait, what was the line?
Now I'll hit you in the face. I'll hit you in the face.
Receiving medals or medallions. Is that the same thing?